Record.
Okay, let me ask you a starting question, and then you can go over again.
Right.
The starting question is, Pearl Harbor was in 1941 on December the 7th. Where were you in school on December 7th, 1941, when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I was in Sunday school.
Okay, but what year were you in school?
Let me think.
1941.
That's 4 years. I was probably in the 9th grade
Okay.
in 1941. But I had already decided in the 9th grade that I was going to be a nurse. And as I had said before, I worked as a ward aide at the hospital when I was 16, just to make sure that that was what I wanted to do. And I also worked one summer in Daddy's grocery store, learning how to take care of a grocery store.
How come you didn't work at the hospital that year? How come you worked at the grocery store?
I don't know. Daddy wanted me to work in the store, I think.
Did the other kids work at the store?
He needed some help, and so I worked in the store. He paid me a little bit, not as much as the hospital did, but he paid me a little bit, and it was enough for me to earn my clothes and my spending money, and that's what the hospital paid me enough to do also. And as I said, we went to school. We started going to school down at Weber College for the first year that I was in nurses training. We'd walk it was a mile from the nurses' home down to Weber College. We'd walk down in the morning, go to school all morning, come walk back at noon, hurry and grab something to eat, and walk back down to the college, and then walk home, and then go to work.
All those years that you were in nurses training and the war was going on, did thoughts ever cross your mind that they might send you to a place, where they were fighting?
No, I really didn't think about that particularly. They gave us our uniforms.
Even though they were short of nurses, huh?
They were short of nurses, but they didn't tell us that we had to go in the service. We just had to keep working as a nurse somewhere. And of course the war ended 4 months after I ended nurses training, so I didn't have to worry about that. Bob, my brother, didn't want me to be in the cadet corps because he thought I might end up down in New Guinea where he was. And he didn't think that the nurses had a very good situation down there. But that wasn't the case. And I stayed in nurses training for 3 years. As I said, we went to Weber College for our classes the first year, and then from then on we were affiliated with the University of Utah, and they sent their teachers up to the hospital and to the nurses' home where we had our classes. The most difficult time, I think, in nurses training was when I was on 7 at night to 7 in the morning shift. I had a 12-hour shift, and at 8 o'clock I had a class. And I couldn't stay awake in class. It was almost impossible. But they didn't fail me. They just let me take it incomplete and take the class over, which happened to be OR and communicable diseases. And when I took it over, I had a better teacher at that time, more interesting teacher, and I could stay awake, and I got an A+ in the class. So I was glad they let me do that. And then after I finished nurses training, I wanted to get off night duty. They kept me on night duty so much because I lived so close. And they said, well, you can go home anytime, but some of these other girls can't, so you stay on night duty. And when they wouldn't take me off night duty, I quit the hospital and went to work in public health, which gave me some wonderful hours, daytime hours, and Saturdays and Sundays off and all holidays off. But while I was in public health, they told us we had to join the Red Cross. So I became a Red Cross nurse. And in 1949, we had a terrible polio epidemic in Ogden and various other places also in this country. And the Red Cross sent me to work on the polio ward. It's the first time I'd ever seen an iron lung. I had a 5-year-old girl with an iron lung. And the iron lung kept stopping on me, and I could just see myself pumping the thing up and down all night long, but I kept replugging it in, and it kept going. And we were short-handed there, too. And the person, it was in a Catholic hospital, and the person in charge on that ward was not even a nurse. She was a pharmacist. And she didn't know how to start any of the IVs or any of the blood transfusions that we had to do. And so they always called on me to do that. So I was glad that I'd had the training that I could do that. And I worked on polio for quite a while. I worked in public health. I'd go to work during the morning at public health, and when I finished my shift there, I'd go up to the hospital and work another 4 hours every weekday, and then I'd work full shift on Saturday and Sunday, and I did that for several months until I became sick myself. And the doctor said that I had an aborted case of polio. But I was lucky. I didn't have any problems with it, except that I couldn't swallow more than one swallow at a time, and I couldn't drink out of a drinking fountain for years. I couldn't swallow up, and I had difficulty swallowing pills for a period of time. But I got over that. And after I got better, I went back to work on the polio ward until we got over that epidemic. But I learned a lot about it, and then I decided to go back to school. Oh, during that time, I got engaged to a young fellow that was in the Air Corps, and then when he came home from the Air Corps, he decided to go on a mission. And I waited for a while, but it just wasn't working out. So I decided to go back to school and get my degree, and I went back to the University of Utah. And
That's to get the degree in nursing?
to get a Bachelor of Science degree.
Oh.
So actually, it took me the equivalent of 5 years to get a bachelor degree in nursing, which I got.
And that was to be a registered nurse, or what?
I was already a registered nurse.
So what was the bachelor going to do for you at that time?
Just give me a little extra training. And after I finished that, graduated in 1951. I graduated from the University of Utah in 1951 in June. And before that time, I was going with Justice Craycroft, and we got married in August. And he was going to school up at the Utah State in Logan, and so I went to work in the LDS hospital in Logan, right across from the temple up there. And it was kind of a difficult place. I was working on the medical ward. We had a lot of old people, a lot of very serious illnesses, and I had some pretty tough experiences working there. And then when he finished in December, we moved to Salt Lake. And I wanted to work in the primary children's hospital. I applied, but they were still at the little old hospital down on North Temple, and they were building a new hospital up on 14th Avenue, and that was going to open shortly. They didn't need me down at the old hospital, but they would at the new hospital. And Justice started working. He couldn't get into a school to teach school right then, so he started working at Tooele Army Base. And when they found out I was a nurse, they said they wanted me to come to work down there too. I didn't really want to, because I wanted to work at primary, and they said, well, come work until that job opens up. So we both worked down at the Tooele Army Base. I worked in the hospital, and he worked on the base. But as it turned out, I found out I had to work on weekends, and he didn't, so I had to drive down by myself in the winter. The bus didn't go on Saturday and Sunday. We'd take the bus during the week, and I had to drive down, and the roads were very bad. So I decided I didn't want to continue working down there. It just wasn't worth it to me. So I quit. And right about the time that I quit, my grandmother Wheelwright had a problem with her legs, was in the hospital with a blood clot on her leg, and they wanted to send her home, and couldn't send her home alone. So the family asked me if I would come out and take care of her and get her back on her feet. And I said, well, I could do that until the job came open at the primary hospital. So I went up and took care of Grandma for 2 or 3 weeks. And that was a good experience for me. I really
That was
got
in
close
Salt Lake?
In Ogden. I got really close to my grandma.
So Justice stayed in Salt Lake,
He
and you
stayed
went
in
to
Salt
Ogden.
Lake, and he'd come up on the weekend and stay with me. And I stayed with Grandma and got her back on her feet, and got very close to her. Of course, I always was, but I got even closer to her during that particular time. And then when the call came from the primary hospital, Mother's Aunt Ella, Grandmother's youngest sister, came and took care of her and stayed with her until Grandma died a few years later. But Grandma was one of these people that always would sidle up to me and she'd say, "Do you have enough money in your house?" And she'd slip me a $5 bill. She always wanted to do something for her grandkids. She had plenty of money. She would do that. I guess she did it for a lot of us, but I know she did it for me. And she was always so sweet and special to me, for me and everything. So then, after I got married, we moved to Salt Lake. We lived there for a while. He taught school for a little while, but that wasn't working out good for him, and he started work at the hospital as an orderly, and I didn't feel like that was a good situation because he'd had plenty of training, graduated from college, and an orderly wasn't the kind of work that he needed to do. He was very interested in writing, and so he had an opportunity to take a correspondence course in television writing, which he did and passed with the highest honors or highest score. Part of that time he had to go to California and take some in-house training along with correspondence training, and they would find him a job. When he graduated, he had offers from Texas and New York and California and Boise, Idaho. And Earl Glade, who was the manager of KBOI television at that time, we knew it was LES. His father used to be mayor of Salt Lake. And so we decided we'd rather come to Boise than go to any of the other places. It wasn't quite as far away from home as the others, and we just figured we would like to do that, and we knew he would have an LDS boss. So we came to Boise. We got involved in Boise Little Theater. He moved up in his job and was about ready to move on to a bigger station when we had the Boise Little Theater fire and he was killed. And I was 4 months along with Rick there. So I went back to live with Mother and Daddy, and till after Rick was born, and was still living there and getting to the point where I thought I needed to get a home of our own because he needed a home of his own too, and we needed to be on our own, and started dating after a while, which was not easy to do at first, but I did after a while, and then we had a mutual friend that wanted to get Reid and I together. And so they kept trying to get me to come back to Boise. They wanted me to come back to some special program they were going to have in the board. And I couldn't come because my Aunt Eldine died at the time they had it, but they kept after me. And so I came up and met Reid, and I think we talked about that last time, didn't we?
Yeah, that's where we left. That's where we started last time.
So that takes me up through those years. Now, do you want to?
How long did you work at the primary children's hospital?
I was there for 3 years, and I was a head nurse.
But that was the longest you were at any of the hospitals?
Well, I was at the D hospital for my 3 years training plus some more time because I worked at the D hospital for a little while after I finished training, and then I worked at the D hospital after I graduated from the University of Utah until I was married.
And that's the hospital that was right across the corner from Grandma.
That was across any corner from their home
One's
there
not there anymore.
on Capitol and Harrison. So, but the primary hospital was my favorite place. I loved to work with children, pediatrics. The children all called me Mama Craycroft. And then we had a lot of fun experiences as well as some kind of sad experiences. But I got very close to the people that I worked with and got very close to many of the children that I worked with. And I still get a Christmas card from one of them's parents every year.
Oh, wow.
And it's been, 40 years since I was there about. So it was a very, very good experience to work there.
Okay, then let's hear your words